Hello guys, good to see you again. And we're very used to coming to the 6 o'clock service these days, but it's lovely to be back. I normally like to talk off the cuff, but as I've been preparing my notes, I've decided to read, and it was quite an emotional process preparing, and I have a lot to say, and I want to make sure I say it all. So I'll start off with a very basic introduction to me. For those of you who don't know who I am, and I'm not sure if there are, but I'm Robin's husband, and I'm generally referred to as that tall guy that Robin's married to. She has quite a personality in this church, and it's such a blessing to be married to her, but I quite like to fly under the radar when I get the chance, but I was caught out this time, so I'm stuck. I am the husband of a beautiful, remarkable wife and the father of 2 absolutely breathtaking children. I am one of 3 children, born to a South African mother and a French Madagascan father. And we have a surname that most people won't ever be able to pronounce. I'm an engineer, and I build rockets as part of my job, which is pretty cool. And the most significant thing I've ever done, and the most significant thing I will ever do, is to commit my life to Jesus. My mother is a Christian of profound faith. My father, on the other hand, is probably best described as an agnostic, and he wants nothing to do with religion. The majority of their marriage wasn't happy, but they did a phenomenal job raising us as kids. Despite the influence of my mother's faith in Jesus, our family never experienced the kind of spiritual leadership that only a father can provide. And already, after having been a father for just 4 years, I've realized exactly, what it means to provide spiritual leadership to a family and what we might have missed out on. My childhood experience of church was impersonal, and I thought that God was an abstract, distant figure whom my heart couldn't access. By around 13, I had become comfortable with the idea that God didn't exist, and declared to my parents, I don't know why I was declaring to both of them, but it just felt right, that I was quitting church. I quickly became a staunch atheist, and throughout high school I fiercely declared the stupidity of having faith in a God that science didn't need. Somehow I believed that science provided the answers I needed, and better still, that I was in complete control of my life and my destiny. I was content, apparently. My faith in no faith held strong throughout my early university years. Then I slowly encountered more and more analytically minded people who were completely at home with the idea of God, and primarily the idea of a Christian God. They were patiently relentless with me, and I hated it. Besides being irritating, I hated it because what they said unsettled me. Even to the point that I attended my first Alpha course with the sole intention of causing trouble, and it didn't work very well. In my postgrad years, when I was finally able to rid myself of these cocky Christians, I started mixing with 3 free thinkers who refreshingly didn't seem to have a care in the world. They served as my anchor for a few years, and while I drifted around with them, I tried things that I really shouldn't have had the need to try, and realized soberingly that I had more questions than I would ever have answers for. Then one night at a house party, I decided to try a new pickup line on a beautiful girl that I'd been eyeing out. It was, "What's your take on God?" We concluded our discussion just before sunrise, with our lives having been changed forever. Even though she was wrestling with God herself at the time, there was something remarkably solid and peaceful about Robin that I desperately wanted to experience myself. Gradually, as our friendship grew, I began to let my guard down and pay attention to the concept of having faith in Jesus. At around 25, I started the process of handing my life over to God. As much as I wanted it to be, my life wasn't turned around overnight. I desperately wanted a clean break from my past, but instead, God seemed to be giving me a list of homework to do. However, it was clear to me that something deep within me had been healed the moment the Holy Spirit arrived. It's been a long but tremendous journey with God since. One of my greatest struggles along the way has been handing the authority of my life over to Christ. Because of this, I fear the future. I exhaust myself trying to keep my life on the path that will offer the successes and rewards that I think it should. And I spend much of my time living in the future instead of the present. When I cling on to having authority over my life, I become consumed by what I believe my successes and my failures are. And while this is all ongoing, I completely disregard the work that God has commissioned us all to do. My verse, I've titled the verse of the season, the current season. I don't believe it defines me and my life in total, but the verse is Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. In 2009, Captain Sully Sullenberger was in command of a US Airways flight leaving LaGuardia Airport in New York, with 155 people on board. As the plane was climbing away from the airport, being flown by the first officer, it hit a flock of geese which destroyed both of its engines. The flight seemed doomed because the plane wasn't high enough to make a safe landing at any of the neighboring airports. But thanks to the remarkable skill and fortitude of Captain Sullenberger, the plane made a safe crash landing on the Hudson River, and 155 lives were saved. The event became known as the Miracle on the Hudson and inspired the movie Sully. It's not unusual for the first officer to do the bulk of the flying on a commercial airliner, as he or she racks up the flying hours under the supervision of the captain. In an emergency, however, the captain will typically take control of the plane, saying, "My aircraft," to which the first officer is duty-bound to respond, "Your aircraft." For the sake of safety, the transition of control must be distinct and unambiguous. Why does the captain call the shots when things go haywire? Because the captain has supreme authority over the plane, to which the first officer must submit. Authority belongs to the captain because, simply put, he knows best. Although it's taken me some time to fully accept, I've recognized that God has supreme authority over my life, to which I must submit. Authority belongs to him because, pretty obviously, he knows what's best. Most of the time, we are the ones who exercise control over our lives through the decisions we make, just as the control of a plane is typically at the hands of the first officer. We are the ones who make the choices that influence the direction that our lives take. And this, you could say, is the act of practicing whatever we've learned. But I've often forgotten that God is always right alongside me in the captain's seat, keeping an eye on everything I do. And when things go awry, when I've realized that I've messed up, or when I've been affected by someone else's mess up, he calmly instructs me to hand over control to him with the words, "My aircraft." Because we have free will, though, we don't have to recognize his commanding authority. He gives us the freedom to reply, "No, actually, it's my aircraft." I can recall many, many times in my life when I've chosen to reply in this way, and it has never ended well. If we refuse to hand over control to God when he asks for it, then we're refusing to recognize that he is God who has authority over our lives, not us. And we're also refusing to submit to his will. And when we don't submit to him, how can we remain in him? And if we can't remain in him, how can we bear fruit for him? And if we don't bear fruit for him, how can we glorify him? But if instead of wanting to do things our own way, we place our full trust in him and yield to him and say to him, "Lord, your aircraft," when things go wrong. He promises to make our paths straight and to land us down safely. Of course, the landing may be uncomfortable for us, and I think this is what many of us fear. It may be humbling, and in some cases, it may leave our lives looking quite different. But I'm quite sure that God knows how to fly the plane. So the next time you hear my aircraft, reply, your aircraft. Just to wrap up, Lord, in prayer, we are humbled before you, Lord. You are so big, and you have everything wrapped up. And through our disobedience, we refuse to listen. We're desperate to do things our own way. And the consequences are terrible. And they carry on being terrible no matter what happens. Lord, we ask that you break through to our hearts through the message tonight, through messages throughout the rest of the week, Lord. That you are in control, you have authority of our lives, and when we need it, you are in control of them. Amen.